Good morning, everyone, and good day to all the people who have joined from different regions of the world. This is Alpna Doshi. I'm Chairwoman and CEO of Stralynn Consulting Services, a niche firm in digital transformation enabled by AI. I've been in the industry for over 30 years now and have enjoyed all the changes that have brought us so far to this point. With me, I have an excellent colleague and friend in Ashley Miller, Director of Procurement and Finance in Sophos, a private equity Thoma Bravo owned company. Sophos is a well-known name in cybersecurity domain, and I'd like to mention that Ashley, more than his role, has been such a wonderful human being. And it's such a pleasure, Ashley, to have you on our Fireside Chat, which is the whole series of AI Frontiers, C suite conversations. And our today's topic is going to be on unlocking AI's potential for procurement and finance and private equity in particular. But certainly, we will cover other domains that Ashley has the privilege of actually covering in his past lives. With that, may I request you, Ashley, to say a few things about you so our audience gets to know you, as well as a question, direct question, what made you move into this domain where you are respected like God by the rest of the parties? So, Ashley, over to you.
Alpna, that was the kindest introduction I could possibly ask for. Thank you so much. Um, I'll start off a little bit about my background. I actually started off on the operations side. I was in the data center, part of a telecom industry role. I did that for about 8 years. And if you guys remember around the early 2000s, there was some dot-com bubble bursts and some things that kind of happened in the market. And I was in a role and I had a lot of institutional knowledge, and my role was coming up for the chopping block. And someone in the finance group said, how'd you like to cross the aisle and come and work in our group and bring all your institutional knowledge with you and help us on the buy side?
Hmm.
So instead of being the internal customer, support the internal customers. And that was a well over 25 years ago. I made that change into finance, worked through a series of roles, spent almost 15 years in telecom, internet service provider in particular, but it's all the same bells and whistles when you think about telecom industry. And then in that role, I started to focus in on the strategic side, so moving up the food chain and the procurement model and saying, well, what are the most important relationships and how do we drive a strategic relationship? And it allowed me to grow in role. I did work in the telecom industry. I spent 2 years in fintech, but the reality is I had an opportunity to go to work for a Fortune 10 company in the pharmaceutical distribution role. I spent 6 years there leading teams focused on technology sourcing, and that allowed me to really, um, because I was leading a team of a pretty substantial size and a pretty significant amount of spend, the exposure alone was priceless. And so, about 2.5, 3 years ago, I heard about Sophos and I saw what they were trying to do. They were trying to create a strategic sourcing practice from scratch. They had a very mature, they still have a very mature purchasing function, but strategic sourcing in and of itself is a different beast. And it was very appealing to be able to come to a small company, part of a private equity firm, and just build something from scratch and allow my DNA to be a part of that build. And so I'll close off with I've had a lot of great support along the way. I don't think I've started my career thinking I would be doing global strategic sourcing, but I definitely found that it was a great fit. And over time, it made more and more sense. And then I was able to, about 10 years ago, move into a leadership role where I started to not just do the work I could do with my own capabilities, but to lead teams through processes. And then the last component would be working as part of portfolio company, I now get exposure across a breadth of 50 to 60 other companies who also have strategic sourcing functions. And so it's really amazing to say, like, my network has never been stronger.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm really, really grateful both on the supplier side and on the private equity side that I've been able to build this really robust function. And hopefully I'm helping other folks. And that's what today's about, is how can I take what I know and answer great questions and maybe help someone else land something that they might not have even thought of before.
Excellent. Thank you for that response. In fact, a couple of points I noticed as we go a long way back. I also had my earlier days in telecom working with Verizon. So, in those days, I used to think, I mean, telecom is the only thing that really mattered. And of course, the world is a lot bigger. And when I was the operating partner at Thoma Bravo, and we had an opportunity to interact on various other portfolio companies as well, it really showed that how much diversity can be there in a particular company, despite the context of infrastructure and systems. The kind of systems are always different, the people are different, but sourcing is one function where there are significant commonalities that can be drawn. And you have been extremely instrumental in drawing those synergies to bring to the table at Sophos and also helping the other portfolio companies, Ashley. So I did want to appreciate you on that. And as we get deeper right now, I'd say that, people are well aware of AI now, so it's not like a fundamentals on AI anymore. Uh, when we talk about procurement optimization, I notice like spend analytics is one of the key areas. Other areas like chat GPT, even being as an instrument to include in perhaps negotiations, which is one more important thing that you as a function, as a role, you have to take care of. Uh, could you highlight a bit more, Ashley, on as you are seeing in private equity portfolio companies, how AI can be leveraged to quantify the most significant, maybe cost optimization opportunities, knowing that EBITDA is an important aspect in every portfolio company?
Solid question. And I'm going to answer it probably in two parts. I think the first part is AI is actually it's being incorporated into just about every company's product set. So whether you're buying a subscription services or professional services, people realize that there's a real value to having artificial intelligence lean in on some of the heavy lifting to improve outcomes, regardless of what their product set is. Sourcing's no different than that. So, for example, um, just as a simple example is, I'm looking at a half a dozen suppliers as part of a go-to-market exercise. I can actually leverage AI to give me a compare and contrast opportunity where it will actually scan significant amounts of content and then give me back summary level, even bullet point level, and kind of give those compare and contrast. That's like just one simple example, and there's probably 25 other examples I could get into. At the private equity level, what I would say is we're part of Thoma Bravo's portfolio, and Thoma Bravo is actually making their own investments into AI. I won't get into the naming conventions, but if you go and look at their press releases, you would see something in the last 30 days where we've made some investments in that space. But then when you look at the portfolios, the companies, they're also beginning to leverage AI as part of their product sets. So at the end of the day, the simplest way to describe it is all of us in sourcing need to start understanding what are the 20 to 30 key AI capabilities that enhance what we do for strategic sourcing, and then where do we find those intersect points in the projects that we're doing. It will not solve everything, but it may be able to catapult results or speed results, and may be able to digest and help you manage project work that otherwise it would take hours and hours of time to do, and you can kind of raise your focus up to the right place. Um, I hope that answered that question pretty
No,
well.
absolutely. I recognize that because I know that every time, and even when I was on the other side of the of the fence, as a provider, it is required to evaluate multiple suppliers, and you have to go through the full drill again and again, and it can be very time consuming, and at the same time, it's prone to errors as well, with so many suppliers now in the market, and especially in the domain that we are talking about, digital transformation and AI. Those require, wow, there's just too many suppliers, you bet, right, Ashley? So having an automation, having some kind of a method to this entire volume of work that needs to be taken up, your insights, I'm sure, are extremely useful here. And I think to many of our listeners who are wanting to get into this domain of procurement and finance, I would say this is a great example of where they need to be reskilling themselves. Maybe highlight a point or two in that direction, Ashley. What are some things that you would like to see in your team, come up with the kind of competencies in a procurement team that would be useful to you at this time and stage of life, if you call it that way, with everything being AI?
And again, another solid question. It's hard to be succinct in some of these answers, but I'll try to at least hit two or three of the key attributes for a good strategic sourcing person, and then maybe where the intersection of AI is on that. So I think the first attribute is, and I've joked about this in the past with other folks, but um, a good negotiator is someone who, for example, if you said, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying a car. I want to go to the dealership." If your friend says, "I want to go with you. I'm going to pack a lunch and we're going to go help you buy a car." That's someone who's actually actively engaged in the process, because it is, again, it's lengthy and it can be heavy. But if someone's like, "But I have an interest in the outcome," that person's going to be much more successful. If you dread negotiating for a car, if you dread um, haggling for a price, it's not a great fit, and that's fine. There's other things that those folks can do. I think the second strong attribute is that you have to be able to consume the right amount of data and then distill that data into action. In other words, someone's going to ask you a question. It's a business related question, and you have to be able to go to enough data or the right data and then say, the data tells me the answer to your question is, why. And those analytic skills, they can be taught. Where does AI intersect with that? Obviously, if you're saying, I need to look at, in my simple example, I'm looking at 6 suppliers and I'm trying to compare some specific attribute, AI might be able to step in and take 18 decks across four different types and pull all that together into a simplistic view that allows you to be able to see the answer to that data driven question. The last thing I would say, though, is, um, and I say this with humility, AI is a wonderful tool in the toolbox, but it is also maturing. You need to also make sure that anytime you're relying on AI to do analysis, to answer questions, even if it's something that you feel like is simple, trust but verify. Don't just assume that because you've asked a tool that mimics human action and human outcomes, that the answers are fully vetted. Give yourself a few times to kind of refine your questioning and test your answers to make sure that you can then trust those responses that you're getting are good. But outside of that,
Yeah,
I would actually say back to the audience, as people watch this, is you're probably using AI casually in your everyday. If you use social media, if you're using text and chat tools, there's a lot of things being integrated there. Test it, play with it, kind of get a feel for how it works, because that's what you're going to need. How do you write prompts that actually serve the outcomes that you need? And then how do you, again, narrow the flashlight of all, this massive set of information into a very narrow, usable set of information, like signal to noise type stuff.
absolutely, absolutely. And that is one thing, um, well spoken, of with respect to the data, the accuracy of data, which will be the basis for all the decision making. And I always tend to think that it's, regardless of the AI as a tool and the evolution with respect to the statistical models that get built using that data, the human side always comes into play as an oversight. So it's not necessarily taking away jobs, but it is just moving the jobs into the next value chain, so to speak. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to, from a personal front, I did want to hear a bit of insight from you. Does in procurement with AI being there and the analytics and the kind of insights you shared just now, does gender of in your team play a big role? Like what kind of insights man, women, or neutral genders can bring in? Have you thought about that, Ashley?
So I would say that gender might come into play possibly in maybe the initial stages of how you might formulate a question. I think that the more that you spend time working with an AI tool, the more you learn to write and formulate in the style that best serves the outcomes. So maybe at the beginning there's something there. I would say more likely is sometimes there's cultural items to cross, and so it's the same thing, right? It's understanding how does the computer listen and respond, and then trying to make sure that when you ask it questions, you're asking it in a way that it consumes information and produces outcomes. Gender not as much. We are a diverse team. So we have male and female. We're a small team, but um, we basically hire the people that are consensus hires that are the best qualified fit. It's men, it's women, it's people of color. So I think that you come with great skill, and
Yes.
then you learn how best to leverage the AI tools at your disposal. And there is a little bit of in that training, there's a little bit of kind of standardizing on best practice. And so maybe a little bit at the beginning, but outside of that, I think it pretty much standardizes.
Fair enough. Yeah. And that's, that takes us a little bit more deeper into our journey of this fireside chat, where if you look at it, the operations of a company, pretty much every company, regardless of industry, is run through a lead to cash process.
Sure.
And it can be a product company, it can be a services company, any company. And when we think about a lead to cash process, and knowing that you have a background in finance as well, I'm very interested to hear a bit more on the finance transformation. Um, I notice like invoices, thousands of invoices keep coming, invoice processing. What is it? I mean, can you share some story here where, in your lives that have brought you to this point successfully is how have you managed to really improve the perhaps invoicing cycle or any example of finance transformation that, portfolio companies have had to go through?
Great question. So I can give you a very explicit example. Um, at a prior company, I was involved with the purchasing side, and it's the folks are familiar with two-way match and three-way match for invoice processing. So the company I was at was basically um, using three-way match for just about everything, even though there were 70% of their invoices were um, recurring amounts that were within a 5 to 7% tolerance of variation. Like, well, almost three-fourths of their spend was easily a two-way match, but they didn't have automation in play. And so we actually developed, in that particular case, it was not an AI. It's a little bit of time ago, but it was an OCR ingest, and so it was the precursor to what is modern day AI. And it would, instead of a human being receiving an invoice and then trying to manually input it into a system to begin a match, the tool would ingest that invoice, and because it had a standard format, it knew how to pull the right fields, and then it reduced the need for a three-way match on that type of spend. Now, the first question that people asked when we started proposing the idea was what about all the people that do that work? The reality was is we had other work, knowledge work that those people could do. We basically took them out of this transactional volume hole and moved them up to exception management, process improvement, those folks were retasked and retrained, and they were delivering greater value than just the sum of their ability to be human machines doing work that could be automated. So think about that was probably that was 8 or 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to modern capabilities, you might be able to work with a an AI model with sufficient large data model, right? Large language that has sufficient information in it that you can ask it a rote question, just a softball or a curveball, and it might have enough data to be able to answer those questions without much more prompting.
Yeah,
That's pretty transformative, and it's only going to get better from there. The only caution I would say is as anyone in the as anyone out there is looking at integrating AI, it really does matter what the data set that the AI is looking at or referencing, and making sure that that data is again is trusted, but also maybe it's insider. So you might be asking it to analyze things that are not going to be going outside of your organization, and those things are all doable now. That capability is all doable now because the technology has caught up to where we are, so that we can integrate AI tools into our own environments behind our own firewall systems, and even use those tools effectively to drive efficiency.
sure.
It's there's no in everything that I've read and everything I've done, there's no scenario where AI displaces workers. If everything goes the way it's planned to do, those workers actually they do more valuable work because people are really important. And if I can remove the busy work from someone's day and they can focus in on what's most important, we still need that person to do that most important work. So I'm really excited about what Tony Bravo's been investing in. I'm excited of where Sophos is going with some of the decisions they're making, both internally and then customer facing. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a great tool in the toolbox for any industry. I just happen to be in strategic sourcing and purchasing,
Yeah.
and I can point to those things specifically.
No, coming from you, I think the points that you made regarding not replacing jobs, but rather embracing many of these things in perhaps higher value add functions
Mhm.
is really music to the ears, I am sure, for our audience and for many people striving to survive in this kind of a rapidly changing dynamics where technology seems to be the one and only way to do things or to get things done. But there is a good balance and good mix. And I do want to share a bit of an example from my end as well. It's not exactly a promotion, but may take like 10 seconds to describe a product which we are working on called Straw L2C. It's about the lead to cash transformation topic we are talking about. And I noticed that almost industry neutral, everyone has to go through that threshold build of doing the lead to cash digital transformation through AI. But then the customization part of it is what is the professional services where you do need the people. So it's not like, I can come and tell you, hey, look, I can change your 2 year cycle of digital transformation down to 3 months, but that is only possible to do the 3 months of that automated threshold product. But then you do need the additional 2 months to add maybe instead of the 50-member team that we are used to providing, maybe just a 5-member team to help customize it to the context. But this 5-member team is the high end, high competency, much more value add kind of a team that will help transform your whole digital transformation journey. But at least you don't have to go through it every 2 year cycle with, a huge $50 million projects. Instead of that, have this kind of a product, which I'm sure others are also working on. Happy to be of service in that area to many of our listeners as well. Um, with that, I would say, Ashley, that, you know, AI first culture is something that is coming top of my mind, and many people I have spoken to at the board level. There is absolutely nothing getting us away from AI. How do you think can leadership be more effective in communicating the value of AI to employees at all levels? What are some of your thoughts and what are some of your stories around it? How managements deal with it right now? What improvements are possible?
Great question. I would say in a more I'm going to answer the question, but I want to in a more summary statement up front. I would say um, all leadership teams, our companies that are 10 times, 100 times our size, our portfolio organization, I think they're all challenged first to understand what AI is capable of doing. That capability understanding has to be what is it doing today and what does it look like, let's just call it in 24 to 36 months. Like where is the use of AI going? The second thing is once you have that kind of base of knowledge, then it's practical application. So what are we doing? We can say, well, AI can do 100 things. Of those 100 things, 10 things of those are interesting to me in my day-to-day role. Then how do I then create a practical application of utilizing some of those features or those functionalities? I think the one thing that we probably need to all remember, well, at least one thing that we all need to remember is just like all technology, it evolves very quickly. The things that we're integrating today could look much, much different in 24 months or 36 months. So once you start making some decisions about where you're going to be maybe investing, hold the reins loosely, like give yourself the ability to be dynamic and responsive to improvements. So for example, you were mentioning like large dollar investments. I always have to remind folks that Sophos is a very a successful company, and the sell side is doing great. But I'm on the buy side, and so I'm always trying to make sure that I'm keeping cost in line with revenue. And so my underlying statement is how am I using AI to deliver better results to keep cost in line with revenue? If revenue is growing, that's great, but I still have the same job. If revenue is challenged, right,
Yeah.
I still have the same job. So at the end of the day, it's practical application. I think leaders are doing it. I think organizational owners are doing it. It is a little bit of a buzzword, but just keep in mind that it is going to continue to evolve the same way every time. Think about internet connections. Dial up became ISDN, ISDN became DSL, DSL became, fiber to the premise. We're going to continue to see those evolutions. So roll with what you think works that you can practically apply, but hold on loosely and don't go into a place where you've made investments that where those results aren't going to give you where you're not going to get the results, the ROI on that investment is
Yeah.
where I'm going.
These are great words of wisdom, honestly. I mean, I think if I translate it in my own way and in some of the journeys, like AI for competitive advantage just does not mean only revenue, but also on the bottom line aspects. And
Right.
there's so many things that happen at that ground level, what I call almost, I used to be called a plumber because, I used to do digital transformation. I still do it. A plumber stays a plumber all their lives. That's in your instinct and data or your DNA. So, let me bring us, I think, knowing you are so brilliant at this, I'm going to go through a quick lightning round with you, Ashley.
Sure.
There's so many questions that seem to be pouring from our audience. So we'll have to kind of shoot at it.
Okay.
Let's see what you think about it. So one of the questions is today AI outputs are validated against the standard processes to make sure there is no error. In the finance and procurement department, do you see the AI tech maturing to have more reliable
So yes, and that is going to be an ongoing process. We should always do trust but verify. It's actually probably a core tenet of working in any finance organization is yes, we build systems of trust, but we at least pull out a sample set and test that sample set to make sure that the results we're getting. And if we find errors or if we find opportunities, maybe is a better example, we should correct those and then test again. It's a continuous improvement environment in finance always.
Yeah. Well said. Continuous improvement is the key word that we should take away from that. I remember an SAP transformation we were involved in. And we thought that, well, after 10 years we are doing this, we must be done. And that was for a public company. But no ways. I think it continues, and you have to evolve with the changing technologies. Back to your integration point. Let's move to the next lightning round question. What emerging AI technologies are expected to have the biggest impact on cybersecurity in procurement for private equity portfolio companies?
So I'm going to focus first, and I'll do this very quickly, is AI can be used for good. AI can be used for not good. I think that what we're going to see in the cybersecurity space is that the same way we're trying to leverage machine learning, artificial intelligence to be able to improve outcomes within our whatever our respective roles and responsibilities are. Mine happens to be strategic sourcing and purchasing. There are bad actors out there who are going to be leveraging AI to create unique and maybe harder to defend ways to attack. To use to use in their cybersecurity attack portfolios. So again, just be diligent. Not AI is a tool in the toolbox, but it's we're going to use it for good for everything that we're doing. Just be aware that not everyone out there maybe has the same. It's going to be a challenge, right? And the more it matures, the more of a challenge it will be. I'm hoping that the industry of defense will continue to be as strong as the industry of attack.
Excellent. Well said. And my story around that is, on one of the boardroom tables, there was a discussion about blockchain. And we said, fine, let's just take AI up for the finance transformation because it has such a great way to streamline and remove so many manual touch points, including like robotic process automation, right? So I would say we should bring those applications to the limelight more significantly and take these forward, but again, with the AI top down culture. Let's move on to the next one. How do you suggest bringing AI gradually to handle the procurement process without disrupting the business, knowing that business is always your best friend?
Um, I can tell you how we're doing it. The simplest answer is before you release something that is customer facing, and keep in mind that my customers are internal to the company as well as suppliers. So, for example, when I'm in the middle of supporting a negotiation, that supplier is also a customer of mine, but the internal customers who I'm mainly dealing with. Um, you really need to have fully vetted use of AI internally first before you start to use it in any type of external way. So within our finance team, we need to build processes, build functionality around AI, and then test it and feel comfortable about it. And then we can start sharing it with other business unit stakeholders, other leaders. And then if we all still agree it's a great tool, it might be something that begins to become something external facing. But at the end of the day, it's mostly about driving internal improvement and maybe cross-functional improvement, less about, again, in my world, I'm on the buy side. On the sale side, the sky's the limit. AI has incredible capabilities and truly everything from supporting customer needs to thinking creatively about problem solving and solutioning. AI is the sky's the limit on the sales side.
So, last question before we kind of round up, since I'm really honestly finding this time as too short. How can AI facilitate the integration of systems? I think there was a time actually when people just thought CIOs and such back end people, and it's changed significantly. I have deep respect. I've been a group CIO in the past for big companies, MNCs, and for private equity portfolio companies. But how do you facilitate the integration of systems and data between merging companies? Can you throw a quick highlight on that one?
Yeah. So in the past, all of us have gone through some type of M&A activity. Maybe we were at a place where that was a very heavy manual lift with lots of people being involved and lots of humans doing comparative work. Then there was a probably 15 or 10 to 15 years ago, it was API. So basically you could say, well, I'm going to build tools that will take two different ERPs and let them speak to each other because I'm going to build this this API between them. What AI is now able to do is say, I don't need to have something built between the two of us because I can read side ERP, and I can read side B ERP. So you can ask me a question and I can give you answers based on the machine. The AI can give you an answer based on the fact that it can consume and process and give you outputs based on its capabilities, not based on its integration capabilities. So that's a I think for us, there's a little bit more of a development cycle because we are testing. The releases for AI that we are doing internally in any way would be small and ensuring that what we are looking at is good information. But then from there, once you have those comfort levels and you start to expand, there's really there's no limit to what it could do and how much faster it might be able to do things. But at the end of the day, it's not going to displace people. It's only going to make them smarter or faster at what they're doing, or it's going to allow them to say, okay, I've got two systems and I can ask literally a scripted question and get an answer back that feels like it was spoken out by a human. But the reality is it was thousands and thousands of pieces of data that were assimilated to be able to provide that answer. That's a pretty amazing capability.
Totally amazing. My God, Ashley, questions keep pouring in. So I'm going to just request our audience to do please write to us. I think this is a LinkedIn live event, and we'll take up online any of the questions that we have not been able to cover in this short digi capsule time frame. We are trying to keep it short so people can maximize on the time spent and continue with their day jobs. But to round it up, I must say that the AI is there to ease the digital transformation process. Perhaps you can help round it up, Ashley, with respect to streamlining all of these processes. What is your sharing of the key takeaway from this whole discussion, from this whole topic? What is it that we should remember?
Um, Key takeaway in a few sentences. AI is a powerful new technology. New meaning being applied to the spaces that we're in. So figure anything in the last 5 years, that's new. It is meant to augment capabilities. It's meant to accelerate capabilities. It's meant to support better outcomes. But at the end of the day, it's another tool in the toolbox that we need to be educating ourselves on for capability, educating ourselves on how to leverage and use properly, even making investments in development. But at the end of the day, good core strategic sourcing and purchasing functions are only going to benefit by having AI as an additional way for you to be able to process systems and people and process and tools. I mean, it's here to stay. And the sooner that you embrace it and understand it, is the sooner you'll be able to leverage it in really creative ways for practical reasons that really solve problems that you have. So
Uh, and I would just say uh, my key takeaway is AI is the guru, but you need a God to run over it. And Ashley, you have been such a brilliant conversationalist on this extremely important topic. I think procurement function, finance functions need much more of this kind of an attitude in order to embrace the technology in a more effective manner, where the technology is not feared, but rather, people embrace it to learn more and to apply their best of minds to leverage it in the most effective manner. So with that, would like to thank you so much. Thank our audience for the time they took to hear us out. And Ashley Miller, a fantastic person. Please reach out to Ashley on LinkedIn, and happy to come back to you in our next fireside chat. Stralynn Consulting Services is a boutique firm in the digital transformation and AI enablement area, helping with implementations and professional services, including our products to see. Once again, thank you. It's a pleasure, and have a great day.